Hi everyone, and thank you for watching the LeWeb Hangout. Today we will be joined by Malte Feller, who is the European president of Zipcar. So Malte should join this Hangout in a few seconds. In the meantime, let me just give you a couple of tips and tricks on how to ask questions. So if you want to ask questions in this Hangout, just join the Hangout on the link that will be shared in a couple of seconds. And if you want to ask questions on social networks, feel free to ask them on Twitter with the hashtag LeWebHangout, or just @reply LeWeb to ask your questions.
Hi there. So now we're definitely live on YouTube. Thanks again.
Hi guys, are you online?
Yes.
But I can't. Oh, here we go. Yep, no, I can see you.
Okay, perfect. So I was saying we're now live on YouTube, and we just also shared the Hangout link, so hopefully people will start joining soon, but we're definitely broadcasting. So we were saying you are the European president at Zipcar. You head up the European operation. Can you just tell us briefly what Zipcar is and what your mission is for the future?
Yeah, definitely. So Zipcar is the world's leading car sharing service. I think people will be familiar with car sharing. We operate a fleet of vehicles that are spread around urban areas. So you'll find a car within walking distance, and around the world, it's about 10 million people who live within a 10-minute walk of a Zipcar. So Zipcar operates in about 20 large metropolitan areas. In Europe, that is in the UK, largely in London, a few smaller cities, in Spain, in Barcelona, and in Austria, in Vienna, and a couple other regional cities. So I look after the business in Europe, after the markets that I just mentioned, and after European expansion.
Okay, cool. So perhaps we start, since we're talking about Zipcar, can you explain us as a customer, how do you use Zipcar? So I create my account, I choose my car online, I go to the parking lot, and I take it. Is that how it works?
Yeah, it's actually quite simple. Most of our reservations today happen through the mobile phone, in fact. So once you become a member, which is a straightforward process as well, you sign up, we check your driver's license, and we will issue that. You will usually find the nearest vehicles for a specific time on your smartphone, and you'll make a reservation. You'll walk up to the vehicle, and you can either unlock the vehicle with the smartphone by just pressing the key in the app, or you take a membership card, and the membership card you can hold onto the windscreen, and there's a card reader behind the windscreen, and the door locks open. And then the key's inside, so you can just get into the car, take the key from the glove box, and start the car and drive away.
Okay, cool. And so I imagine you're now growing, and you were mentioning before, and I just want to take that the number of countries you're in. What's the plan for expansion? I mean, how can you share with our users that are watching right now where are you going to be next, or where do you plan to be next offering the service?
Well, so we're currently in 5 countries. We're in the US, which is where Zipcar started 12 years ago. We're in Canada. We're in the UK. We're in Austria, and we're in Spain. And I think we would say we have 2 paths for expansion, because even in the markets that we're already in, which is those 20 cities in those 5 countries, we see a lot of potential for growth. Our vision really is that we have more people using car sharing than people actually own vehicles in those cities. And that would have a fantastic impact on how we live in urban environments. But imagine if people use car sharing and sell their privately owned vehicles, you would have a lot less parking spaces, you'd have a lot more trees, you'd have a lot less traffic jams and congestion, and just a lot higher quality of life for everybody living in those urban areas. So whether it's in New York, where we have over 2,000 cars, or whether it's in London, where we have more than 1,500, or any of the other cities, we think that's really just the very beginning of car sharing, and we see a fantastic future there. But indeed, we're also looking at entering new countries and new markets. So whether it's in Europe, where France is a very interesting market, with Paris in particular, or other cities, we do think we can bring the car experience to more cities, and we'll be doing so this year and next year.
Cool. Well, actually, I would have a question on the cultural aspect of the expansion of Zipcar, because as you mentioned, the car sharing culture was originated basically in Europe. And have you seen any differences in terms of culture between, for instance, the US and Europe when it comes to owning a car versus well, just having a car whenever you need it, but it's not just yours, such as Zipcar?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, the business of car sharing did start in Germany and Switzerland in the 1980s. But at the time, you must imagine, it was very much low tech, right? So there were some cars parked, in some shady parking lot, and if you wanted a car, you need to make a reservation on some paper sheet. You need to go there, grab a key out of a lockbox, and so it's really not quite the same as car sharing is today, where Zipcar has taken the idea from Europe, started it in North America, but from the beginning, very much more ran the business as a lifestyle product, where we would leverage technology to make it super convenient, and in fact have car sharing be more convenient than having your own car. Right? In our model, the car will have its own parking spot that is somewhere close to your home. So imagine it's only a short walk, as it would be, to your own car, but then when you return, you actually have a parking spot guaranteed, and you can leave the car there when you get back. And you don't need to worry about maintenance of the car. When an accident happens, unfortunately they do sometimes happen. Yes, you'll be liable for the damage, but Zipcar will take care of the entire hassle of bringing it to the garage, having it fixed, and all that. So lots of people in the US, where you would have imagined, everybody in the US has 2 or 3 cars. Why would they ever give up their vehicle? They found Zipcar a much better proposition for personal freedom. Because cars, today, they still play a very important role in our life. We may use public transport to get to work, and we feel good about that because we can actually do something while we're on our way. We can, I guess, today use our smartphone to read something and write emails rather than reading a newspaper. But it's productive time. But then there are some moments when you want to get out of the city. You're in San Francisco right now. If you want to go to Marin County or go to the beach, you're not going to get there by public transport. So a car still, I think, gives you a lot of personal freedom. It is very practical as well. If you want to go to IKEA, that's not at all, very nice to do on public transport, certainly on the way back. So, I think the car is still a very important element of your daily life, but it's much more convenient not having to own one and just being able to use one whenever you want one.
Cool. So we do have someone online. Hi, hello. Do you want to add any question?
You're talking to me?
Yes, exactly.
I'm just trying to get into the conversation, so I try to catch up.
Okay, so we'll try to now. One of the questions we actually got asked on social networks, and that seems like a big deal for a lot of people, is the security, and of course the security of the services is very key for you, I would imagine. But what we'd like to understand is what steps do you take to make sure that the whole service, the whole infrastructure that gets more complex every time you had a new city or even a new car. How do you make sure that as you grow, you keep having a secure environment that people can trust? Because we assume that the barrier for the users can exist in the fact that they might be afraid of the service itself in some way.
I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly. I mean, it's in terms of operating this service. Well, yes, there are a number of complexities. So when we enter a new city, we will have to obtain a parking infrastructure, whether it's parking in private parking garages, or whether it's the parking on street. So there are a number of things that we need to ensure before we can actually place vehicles into the public areas and have members kind of begin to access those vehicles. And obviously we do have to arrange for insurance so that absolutely when our members drive the vehicles, our members are insured and everyone else on the road is safe. But it's not actually otherwise such a complex operation. We do have certain processes that make sure that the entire thing is safe and secure. But really, it's about establishing the vehicles where our members need them. So what I mentioned before, it's key that people can walk to the car. People aren't going to take a taxi or a bus trip to the cars, but rather the whole concept comes to life when you can walk to a vehicle in a couple of minutes, and it really becomes to be your own car. So one thing, for example, that's proven to be very successful is working with building developers. As boring as it may sound, but what we do today is when a new building is being built, the building developers contact us and say whether we could put a Zipcar in the parking garage of that building. And it becomes a huge selling point for the apartments in there, where people will actually choose an apartment based on the distance that the nearest Zipcar has to that apartment. So effectively, there are so many, we call them Zipsters, there's so many members now in the cities that we operate in, that to them it's a real benefit when they can, when they know that there's a car right downstairs and they really don't have to worry about getting their own one.
Cool. Another question. You're growing, and let's talk a little bit about numbers. So as far as we understand, you have something like over 700,000 members and 10,000 vehicles. Is that right? I mean, has the growth been more significant in the last year or so?
Yeah, well, the numbers are correct, and we're certainly growing in our existing markets. As I said, we have several markets that are growing 20% per year, and we're also growing by opening new markets. And we would typically enter a city, with maybe 100 cars or so in a certain specific area, and then we grow from there. So we've entered cities from Los Angeles or Austin or Miami last year. We entered Barcelona. We acquired a company in Austria. So we've been growing in various ways. Whether it is opening the cities by just placing our cars there and generically growing, or whether it's by acquiring.
Okay. So does anyone present have questions for Malte?
So how do you look at the German market, for example? I don't know whether you already discussed that or not.
No, we haven't. But I think that the German market is really interesting. It's as I mentioned, one of the oldest markets for car sharing, and it's one of the most developed markets. I think there's several players in Germany that are doing a nice job, and it's really a business that we tend to look at on a city-by-city basis. Whether it's in North America or whether it's in Europe, what we do look at is which cities are attractive to us, and then we're looking at a number of dimensions. What is the population density in a city? What is the public transport offering? How does the city support a car sharing operator with parking? And what competitors are already there? And so Germany is very much on our radar. I could imagine planning to Germany. We have recently tied up with Avis Budget. So together with Avis Budget, it may be an interesting offering that we could create for new markets. And so it's certainly a market we're looking at, but there are no concrete plans that I could discuss right now that we would have to enter the market.
Okay.
Cool.
What are the main problems or obstacles with Germany? I mean, is there, even though it's one of the most developed car-sharing markets, might be some aspects of it that make it difficult besides the competition?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, I think maybe two things. In general, I think Germany has a well-developed public transport infrastructure, which is a really good thing. I think otherwise, though, in terms of the public policy to support parking spaces, it's been a bit inconsistent. So there have been some schemes that have been introduced in the last year or so that make public parking spaces available to car sharing operators, but they haven't necessarily been, I think, all that straightforward. So in Berlin, for example, the signage, this may again sound like a boring detail, but the signage of some of the spaces hasn't been very clearly aligned with what operator is using that space. So it's led to a lot of confusion between car sharing users. Can I park there? Can I not park there? And it's just not very helpful for a service altogether. But otherwise, I think the German market is interesting. If you look at it globally, the German cities aren't actually that big individually, but the country as a whole has 80 million people, and it's a large country. But if you compare the largest cities like Berlin with about 3.5 million people, if you compare that to London, if you compare to Paris, they are much smaller in terms of market size. And then in Berlin, tails off pretty quickly, and you suddenly find or have less than 1 million people. It's just something we're taking into consideration as we expand globally.
Cool.
Thanks.
So I guess I have to jump for the next question, and that is it is regarding competition. So you do have some competition in Europe. I'm just wondering if you see a lot of those regional services that just serve that specific country. So as we like to call them in Europe, the copycat sort of. So do you see them growing in specific markets, and are they getting you a harder time to get to those markets because they perhaps have more knowledge of the local market, or do you feel that because you're a global brand and a global service, you do have more advantage for the end user?
Well, I think it's in the sector of car sharing, I'd be cautious to talk of copycats, because really this model has been developed such a long time ago that I wouldn't look, while Zipcar has established 12 years ago, which is a long time, and while we've developed probably a stronger brand and a stronger technology than others, I wouldn't look at other players in Europe and call them a copycat of Zipcar. If anything, you could call Zipcar a copycat of the very original car sharing models, and I wouldn't think that's accurate either, because really the evolution of the model has been pretty strong as it grew internationally. So if you compare some of the oldest operators like Zipcar, like one of the German ones, or the Swiss provider, they have all evolved into slightly different directions. So I do feel very good about the position that we have. I think 2 or 3 aspects that make Zipcar stand out are the approach that we've had from a technology perspective. Our technology, not just web but also mobile, has been leading pretty early on. So we were the first ones to introduce an iPhone app, the first ones to introduce an Android app, and all those things that you would expect from a leading technology that aren't necessarily a given in the world of car sharing today. So it's an area where we see strong evolution, right? So you start with an app where you can make reservations, but then you evolve the app that it can open vehicles, which is really useful for members, so they can just really with their phone walk up and drive away. and then you take it from there. So we are right now working on enhancements where the smartphone will really be your co-pilot, right? You can you can check things of how the vehicle works. You can get navigation. You can do other things. So there's lots of potential for innovation that we're still driving today. And I think that's the one thing that still today distinct Zipcar from other offerings. And the second thing is that we've always taken more of a lifestyle kind of approach. And you may say, well, what does that mean? Aside of a nicely done logo, it's reflecting in how we run the business. It's reflecting in what vehicles we choose and make them available for members. Right? So it's important to us that there is variety in the fleet. That it's not just one car that we offer, but it's different cars for different use cases you have in your life. Right? It may be just a normal utility car for a Volkswagen Golf if you just want to get in a business or doctor appointment done. It may be a 7-seater if you have a large family excursion, somewhere out to Windsor Castle or someplace in London. Or it may be a van that you need to go to IKEA. So we've always been really looking at what is the, call it use case or call it the purpose that our members use Zipcar for, and how can we better serve that. And that really made us an integral part of our members' life. And then, whether a local competitor has an advantage, I'm not sure. I mean, one piece that is relevant in this business is a close relationship with the city. But I found that even though a city has been maybe supporting a local operator for quite a while, at the end of the day, the city has their own policy objectives, right? And cities in general, they're pretty transparent and open to everybody. You can imagine that if you deal with a city council or a city government, they won't prefer one operator over another, even if the one is a local and they've been there a long time. Just the transparency and the policies that every city runs, they will make their support available fairly to others. So sometimes there is an advantage that you have as an early mover, but we found it's really not first mover; it's first to scale. So it's important that you reach a certain amount of scale in this business. It's not very useful to members if you have 10 or 20 cars, but it is a big deal if you've got 500 or 1,000 cars. So it's about getting to a critical mass so that you have the distribution around the city, that you are really within walking distance, and that there's not just one car like 7 minutes away, but there's maybe 5 cars all 4 minutes away. And that really gives value to the service, and that's what we strive to provide at the end of the day.
Actually, I would have a question that comes back to a point that you mentioned with businesses. So we have lots and lots of entrepreneurs and companies that are rising, visiting LeWeb and watching this Hangout. And one of the changes and the major shifts that have come with the internet is the fact that you can now start a company with much less capex and capital that you used to need with brick and mortars businesses. So now the car is still an important aspect, and if you have a company, a startup, you need your car maybe to visit some clients or maybe to run your business in general. What I'm curious about the offerings that you have as Zipcar for businesses. How, as a business, can I use Zipcar and maybe have a kind of company car that's not completely owned by the company?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you've almost said it all, and you're exactly right. That similarly to how web serving cost or product development costs have gone down significantly. As a new internet company, you no longer need to rent your servers with dedicated space, everything. You can just use cloud services from Amazon or Google or others. And I guess in some ways, car sharing does exactly the same thing for you. So we've got many young businesses, whether they're internet businesses or even very classic businesses like a photographer or a film crew or an accountant, and they recognize that they can, yes, number one, lower their cost base, but maybe more importantly, gain a lot more flexibility by using Zipcar. Because where in the past they would have maybe needed to have one company car, which was then on the one hand a hassle, taking up money and taking up space and all that. but then also being a limiting factor because they only had one, they can now become a Zipcar business member. We charge them a nominal membership fee. It differs, by country, but it's roughly, £100 per year. And then they get very low rates to use our cars. So we give them benefits of using our cars during the week. We see a lot of usage of that in varying situations, where then, the cars are being used to visit clients, the cars are being used maybe to get supplies, or the cars are being used to deliver products. So really very different things. And again, it's sometimes it's a Volkswagen Polo that someone needs, and sometimes it's a transporter. So again, the variety of the fleet makes it very very good for businesses, and they can just choose whatever car they need for whatever transport situation they have.
Cool. So and we're talking about a service, Zipcar, which is within the sharing economy, which is also our theme for this year. Which spaces do you see growing or being able to be explored within the sharing economy? I mean, apart from, of course, car sharing, which is pretty much your thing, where do you think that the next big evolution in terms of democratizing access to resources will be happening?
It's a good question. I mean, I think what we're seeing is that a dedicated proposition is more successful than kind of a quote random marketplace. Right? So, in other words, car sharing as a concept has been very clear, saying we're giving you access to a certain form of transport, to a vehicle. Right. We see that Airbnb has been very successful, which in the broadest sense I think you can include in the sharing economy. What hasn't maybe been quite as successful is just a broad marketplace where the the typical example is the drill. Yes, you need to get a hole. Do you really need to own the drill? I've got one at our home, and I've had it for a long time. And how many times do I use it? Well, maybe once a year. So yes, it would be a lot more efficient if I could rent the drill for that one time a year, get the couple holes done and give it back. But we haven't really seen those marketplaces find traction as much as you would imagine. Then on the flip side, a dedicated site that just looks after handbags or dresses seems to be more successful, because I think it's easier for consumers to understand the value that they will get out of that, and the use case, the application of such offering. So I'd expect that's where we see new innovations come up. We have seen in closer to us in the transport space, we have seen the ride-share applications come up predominantly in North America, where the idea is if you're going from A to B, whether it's in a Zipcar or whether it's in a normal vehicle that you own, you can make that trip public, and you can take people along. You can essentially transport them. There's some complications with that. That's more difficult when you get into an accident, whether you're actually allowed to do that. But I think it's really interesting to see innovation in that space. And I think generally what we're seeing is that technology, particularly now through smartphones, enables so many more use cases. And it's great to see entrepreneurial creativity take that up and make something of the combination of location and what you have or what you're about to do, and offer it to other people. I think we'll see more dedicated use cases and specific offerings arise from that.
Okay, cool. So now I would ask, so since we are definitely aiming towards wrapping up the call, I'm wondering if anyone that is here has any questions that you would like to ask. Feel free to do so. Okay, they're quiet. They're listening. So I'd say one of the last questions that comes to mind is your program where you try to give back to the small and medium enterprises and to startups, the Smarter Business Blueprint. Can you just briefly tell us about that and what kind of impact are you aiming with it? Well,
so what we thought, as part of our own experience experience, growing and then, reflecting on the work that we've done with some of the companies we've acquired, we felt that it's an obligation for any company that's been successful as Zipcar to share some of what we do. The dialogue that we start to facilitate really is intended to work with SMBs and with young entrepreneurial companies to say, how can we enable you to be more successful? In reflecting on the trends that you've outlined, in terms of it now being possible for small companies to much more effectively compete with big guys. How do they do that? What tools and resources are available to them? What we're intending to do is just continue a dialogue with SMBs, because partly it'll be about about us sharing our own observations and our own success. We started with as any company would start, with a couple people, a big idea, and not very much else. So how do you get from that to the position we are in today? And while we share our own ideas and our own experiences, it's also intended to be a forum for all the participants to share those ideas among themselves. And we found an overwhelming response, because it's not something they can easily do in other forums, right? If you start a company, you will mostly kind of think about your competition, and you'll be very focused on your competition. You'll be observing what they do. You'll be paranoid, and you'll be very active. And that's all great, but it's actually not a brainstorming interaction, because obviously your competition, while you may know them in person, they're not going to talk to you about how to run your business better and what ideas they have. So it's about finding other companies that are in similar situations like you are, but are not competing and are willing to share what they're doing. And that's a dialogue we've started in London, and it's certainly one that will continue, and we may roll out to other markets.
Okay. So Valentin, do you want to ask your question directly, or should I ask it for you? Okay, I guess I'll just ask it. So Valentin is asking if you open a new so when you open in a new country, if you have some kind of franchising program, or do you really own and operate from A to Z a company in every country you're open in?
That's a good question. I mean, so far we do own all our operations. There's one where we have a majority stake and not own the entire business, but that's for historical reasons. So principally, we do own the business 100%. Now, I wouldn't say that it necessarily has to be like that, into the long future. So we are considering other ways of doing it, but it's not to the point yet that we'd be ready to actually engage in licensing agreements or in franchise agreements. So I think at this stage we do own 100% of them. It could change in the next couple of years, but I wouldn't see it changing this year.
Okay. So I guess my final question, if anyone doesn't have any other question, would be, we've been talking about businesses and growing businesses and the sharing economy or not. What would be the couple of that advices? And I know those questions are always very abstract and therefore very, very difficult to answer, but what would be the main things you'd like to share with people that might be wanting to start their own thing or help others start their own thing?
So I don't know that I can offer anything that hasn't been said before, but I do firmly believe that the very core of being successful with a new business is to make sure that whatever product or service you're creating, that it really has a differentiated value against what there already is. And while it's the most obvious thing to say, I don't necessarily see that in all the ideas that I see, whether it's in Zipcar or in my personal life. I think there's a lot of things where you say, well, it's kind of interesting, but why would I really use it, or why would I buy it? And so I think the number one thing is you need to be absolutely convinced that it adds value over the next available thing or the thing that is already existing. And then I think once you have that, then it's about just go. There'll be many people that will tell you that you won't be successful and that you can't do it and everything. But if you are convinced that this idea will actually create fantastic traction, then it's about trying to build it as fast as you can with as low cost as you can. I wouldn't try to get it perfect. I'd try to get it out there. And if you have it out there, see what the feedback is. Are you customers? Rather than some friend or some advisor, but are you customers actually saying that it does work and that they do like it? But then great, keep going, use that. So I think that's the best way to start. Right? So yes, make sure the product or service differentiates, and then go very fast. Don't try to be perfect. Just rather try to get it out there, and make sure that you get customers that are using it, and that you listen to their feedback, you enhance what you do, and you keep going.
Okay, cool.
Thank you very much, Malte, for this interesting insight and tips and tricks for entrepreneurs. So the goal of this session was really to get a little more info about Zipcar, and of course you will be speaking on, I think, day 2 of LeWeb in London in the afternoon. So for anyone who has still questions, please feel free to ask them now. And if you don't, or if you have questions after watching this video on YouTube, well, actually we have a question from Arnaud. Arnaud, feel free to ask the question if you wish. Otherwise, I'm going to ask it for you. So, oh no, Mike. Okay, so Arnaud Bonzon is asking if you have any plans for Asia to deploy Zipcar.
Yeah, Asia is an interesting continent, and it probably depends what area of Asia we're talking about. So in Asia you have areas like India or the Philippines or others where I'd say traffic altogether is somewhat underdeveloped and transport is underdeveloped. So I don't know that you could jump to a concept like car sharing straight away. But then you have cities like Singapore or Hong Kong, or you've got the new Chinese cities that are very much suffering from transport problems, that have either made it, or actually mostly made it, very hard to buy a car yourself. So there, I think it can be quite attractive to offer car sharing. And I can't reveal any concrete plans that we have now, but I would say that some of those cities are very attractive, and I think they pursue public policies where car sharing would fit in quite nicely. They've invested in their public transport infrastructure. They do have really high density. So they sometimes don't have yet the spend per capita or the GDP per capita that you would see in Western markets. If you talk about China, whereas obviously Singapore and Hong Kong do, and so I could see car sharing working there. Without anything I could point to right now from our plans.
All right, so we'll stay tuned. We'll stay tuned for Zipcar in Asia, maybe. That's great news. Okay, so thank you very much for joining this call, everyone. The talk will be available on YouTube in a couple of seconds, and if you have any questions, just let us know, and definitely you may ask your question during LeWeb. So again, Malte is going to be on stage on day 2 of LeWeb. And in the meantime, if you want to join any other Hangouts, please go to leweb.co or london.leweb.co, and we have the list of the following the follow-up Hangouts that we are going to offer on the sharing economy theme. So thanks everyone for joining today, and talk to you before LeWeb.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.